we can just get started, and if you can
Yeah, I
get
think
them,
that's the best way. Go ahead, hon.
no problem. All right, so Coach, if you could just mute your mic if you're
Oh,
gonna try and call people. All right, girls, so I will get,
you're muted now.
all right.
There you go.
So if you have the sheet in front of you, we're gonna talk about two main things today. And the biggest thing that we're gonna talk about right now is catching mentality. You know, where is our head at when we are catching, and how can we kind of do a mental check and make sure that we're doing the right things going forward. So if you're looking at the sheet, you should see where it says catching mentality. We're going to start in that section. So when I think about my catching mentality, the easiest way for me to kind of turn that switch on and off is when the mask goes on, turn that switch on. You're ready to catch. You're ready to make sure that you are going there to do your job. You're there to be a defensive leader on the field, and you're there to make sure that you're completing the three things that I have here on the sheet. So I kind of break that catching mentality down into three different responsibilities. So the first one being that you need to keep every single ball in front of you. If there is anything that you're going to worry about as a catcher, it is making sure that you're blocking the ball, that you're keeping the ball in front of you, that you're hustling, that you're diving, that you're ready to make a play on every single pitch. Okay, every pitch we're ready for something to happen, a bunt to drop down, a girl to swing through a pitch and it just is a dinky ground ball right in front of the plate, a runner to steal, a ball put in play. There's always something to do. If you don't have the ball, you need to find a base. And if there is no base, then you need to be a backup. And as a catcher, you can add one more thing on there, and that's making sure that you're vocally talking to your defense all the time. But I'll get into that a little bit more. Sticking to that first tally where it says keep every ball in front of you. Like I said, you're a wall. Blocking is something that takes a lot of time, but it's the most important part of your position. Okay, your pitcher needs to be able to feel comfortable throwing a drop with a runner on third base and knowing that she can throw that pitch and run the risk of throwing it in the dirt, but you're going to keep it in front of you and she can continue to throw that pitch with runners on base. And I'll get into talking about that a little bit more later too. But if you're not setting that tone with your pitcher, with the defense, and with the other team, that's a piece that ends up being that's missing. You know, I'm sure that we've been in situations in games before, all of us, self included, where a lot of balls get by. And if there's runners on base, those runners are advancing. And that becomes tough as a pitcher and as the defense and as a hitting lineup to, you know, come back from that. That's momentum. This game is all about momentum. And if the momentum that you can provide and that the tone that you can set with your momentum is that you're not letting the ball pass, that you're working, that's what everyone on the field is seeing. They're all facing you. They're watching you and the batter. So when balls are being thrown in the dirt and you're keeping that ball in front of you, you're setting that tone defensively that this is what you're here to do today. You're here to work for your pitcher and for your defense and going forward off of that. If this isn't happening, these next two things become a lot more difficult to achieve. And here's why. So the second responsibility you have in that catching mentality mindset is you're directing the defense. Okay, and there's a couple reasons for that. So the number one reason is that you're facing the defense. You see everything as it's happening in front of you. Okay, your back is never to the field. So you never have to worry about not being able to see something as it's happening in real time. You have the best angle. So if there's anybody who's going to be making any decisions, it should be you. The other reason that you're directing that defense is because you're the one calling the pitches most of the time. Maybe a lot of you are right now getting pitches from the dugout, but as you get older and as you mature as an athlete and as a catcher, that's going to turn into your responsibility. And we're going to talk about pitch calling a little bit at the end, just briefly, like I said at the end. But that is, once again, something that is part of your job, calling pitches, directing that defense. This can be tough for catchers when you're young. I know for me, I was a very vocal catcher. I was constantly talking. I always had something to say, if you can believe that. And that worked for me. But I find it hard to believe that if that's not the mentality that you're adopting, that you're not trying to be as vocal as possible, it's going to make your position very difficult because of this main responsibility. You know, directing the defense is such a high priority for a catcher that the only way to be successful with it is to be vocal. So think of yourself as that quarterback on the field in our game. Like I said, you're the only player with that full visual, and you should own that. And you should be talking. A good way to start incorporating that into your routine when you're on the field is making sure that you address your defense after every single batter. Okay, once the ball's back in the mound and the play is over and the next batter is coming up to the plate, you should be addressing your defense. And there's 3 things that you want to make sure that you're telling your defense when you're addressing them. And I think the order in which you tell them is also important. So you want to make sure you're telling them how many outs there are. You want to make sure you're telling them where the runners are. And you want to make sure you're telling them where you anticipate the play to happen. And here's an example of that. And if you have the sheet in front of you, you can see I wrote it on there. So in between batters, I would walk out in front of the home plate, you know, take my mask off, address the defense, and I would say, hey, ladies, we got one out. We got runners on first base. Watch the bunt here, watch the small ball, and look for that turn 2. Infield's turning 2. You gave them a lot of good information and reminded them about the most important parts of pre-pitch thinking, and you did it very quickly. I also like to repeat the outs sometimes at the end, just as a reminder to let everybody know how many outs there are. That way they can kind of jumpstart their own pre-pitch thinking. And do me a favor, ladies, give me a thumbs up if you know what I'm talking about when I say pre-pitch thinking. So what I mean by pre-pitch thinking is when, and if you don't, that's totally okay. I was just curious before I went forward. Pre-pitch thinking is literally what it's described as. So you're thinking about what the potential play could be before the pitch is thrown. So when you're doing pre-pitch thinking, it's basically just surveying the current situation. So how many outs do you have? Okay, I have 1 out. All right, where's the runner? The runner's on first base. Good. So Kayla, you said you've done some pre-pitch thinking. Like I said, how many outs are there? The runner's on first base. So if there's 1 out with a runner on first base, the anticipatory play would be there could be a bunt. The batter might bunt, or there could be a steal, or a ground ball in the infield. Where do you want the play to go? To second. With a runner on first base and less than 2 outs, you want to try and go for that double play. So you want to get the lead runner at second base. That's pre-pitch thinking. That's just knowing the situation and making sure that you're prepared for if there's a ball hit to you, if you have to cover a base, or if you have to become a backup. And as a catcher, it's really important to know what everybody on the field's job is in those situations. And that takes time. Making sure you know where first base, second base, third base, shortstop, all the outfielders, where they're backing up. That's important for when you're learning how to direct the defense. But like I said, this is just a way to start incorporating that into your on the field catching routine, is in between each batter, when the play is over, addressing your defense, letting them know the outs, letting them know where the runner is, and then letting them know where the play might happen. So again, 1 out, runner on first base, watch the bunt, infield turning 2. That's about as good that's the best amount of information you're going to be able to give. Now, let's say there's a runner on second base and there's less than 2 outs. A fly ball hit to the outfield, what's something that the runner might do? Anybody know? Less than 2. Yeah, she could tag up. So in that situation, you could easily add that in. You could say, outfield, look for the tag here, plays at 3. Whatever you know to be true, say it. It's never going to hurt to remind everybody of what could happen next. No one's going to complain about that. And what you're doing is you're being vocal and you're keeping your teammates engaged. That's being the leader. That's being the quarterback on the field. And that's directing your defense. I don't think it's necessary for when the ball is put in play for you to tell everybody where to throw the ball and what to do with the defense. That's who you guys are as a team, great. But the least you can do is in between batters, let them know, take charge, own that part of your position. So far in terms of responsibilities, we've talked about keeping the ball in front of us, making sure we're blocking everything, we're hustling, and we're setting that tone that we are a good sound defense with a good sound catcher, and we're not to be messed with. The second thing being, make sure you as a catcher are directing your defense. The third thing I have on the list, and the last thing that I think is a main responsibility for catchers, and that's keeping your pitchers happy. At the end of the day, we don't throw the ball. The pitcher does. We call pitches, but we don't throw the pitches. So we can't really control what's coming out of her hand. But what we can control and what we can contribute to as a catcher is ensuring her confidence, making sure that she's ready to throw that next pitch. And how do we do that? Blocking the ball, making sure that we do our number one priority, keeping that ball in front of us. Make sure she's confident that even if she does make that mistake and she throws that ball in the dirt, it's not going to cost her a runner advancing into scoring position or a run scoring from third base. If you're blocking that pitch, you're giving her that confidence. She can throw that drop ball with a runner on third base. That's important. Because what if that's the pitch that you need to strike the batter out and you can't throw it because there's a runner on third? You don't want that to be the situation. Making sure we're blocking. The other ways to keep her happy, focusing every single pitch. You know, as you get older, coaches are going to start to talk to you about what's she look like? How's your pitcher throwing today? What's working? And things that you need to be able to feedback you want to be able to give is the curveball is not breaking, the changeup isn't working, her rise ball's flat today. Whatever it is that you know to be true, the only way you're going to know that is if you're focusing every single pitch. Controlling the runners on base. You know, that happens in a couple ways. Making sure you're checking the runners, not allowing their leads to get too big, throwing behind them if necessary. Pre-pitch thinking, we just talked about that. Communicating with the field and the dugout, you know, making sure that the coaching staff, the team on the field, and yourself are all on the same page. That's going to make your pitcher's job a lot easier. And the last thing I have on there is learning from each at bat. So if you go through the first three batters in the lineup and the leadoff batter strikes out, the second batter hits a pop up to right field, and the third batter hits a line drive to the shortstop, you need to remember that for the next time they come up. So when that second batter comes up who hit the pop fly to right field, you can look to your right fielder and say, hey, Susie came to you last time. That's making sure that you're engaged in every pitch. That's directing your defense. That's keeping your pitcher happy, letting people know what happened. If the leadoff batter comes up and she's on the left side of the box, you think she thinks she's a lefty slapper. You know she's quick from her last at bat. Remind your infield of that. Okay, that way they can your second baseman and your shortstop can move around, get a little closer to the base, and everybody can come in a little bit. Sometimes when you're in the field as a fielder, you're doing your role is to make sure that you're prepared for the ball to be hit to you. Sometimes it can escape you about the actual situation, and that's where your catcher needs to come in. That's where you want to be that vocal catcher and let your infield know, hey, this girl's a lefty slapper, she's got speed, we need to pinch a little bit, and when you field that ball, quickly get rid of it to first base. That's being involved on every single pitch. Any questions? I know I said a lot. I know I went a little bit fast, but is there any questions about anything that I just talked about? Anything at all? Is there anything that I didn't talk about that you would like to ask a question about right now? I love questions, so there's no dumb ones, so don't be afraid to ask. Anything? Okay, so since we have no questions on that, let's move on to the second section that I wanted to talk about. If you're looking at the sheet, the second thing we're going to talk about is pitch calling. Okay, so give me a thumbs up if you have called your own pitches before. Jordan has. Anybody else? Amara has. Okay, so 2 people have called their own pitch. Haley, you have 2? Okay. So give me a thumbs up if you have a coach call, have you had a coach call pitches for you from the dugout that you've relayed to your pitcher? Give me a thumbs up if you've relayed signs to your pitcher. Okay, so first and foremost, when we're calling pitches, the only person that we need to see the sign we are giving is the pitcher. We do not care about we do not want anybody else to see the sign that we are giving. Only her and I are the 2 people that need to be able to visually see the sign. If anybody else on the field, like your infielders or your third basemen or whoever, want to see what sign you're giving, they can move themselves on the field so they can see you give the sign and then move themselves back into position. So just keep that in mind. So your goal is to make sure the only person who can visually see your signs is your pitcher. Now, going forward with that, let's talk about all the things that go into knowing what pitch we're calling in what situation. So the first thing I'm going to explain is, what pitches does your pitcher throw? Does she throw a fastball, a changeup, a drop, a curve, a screw, a rise, a knuckleball? I'm running out of pitches. But what does she throw? Okay, is she right-handed? Is she left-handed? Would you consider her fast, or would you consider her to throw a heavier pitch? Is she a junk ball pitcher, or does she rely on her velocity? There's lots of things that we can talk about. But what kind of pitcher is throwing to you? That's a really important question. Okay, so my pitcher, and when I played at Robert Morris in college, she was a lefty, and she spun the ball, but she had a lot of velocity. Her best pitches were her backdoor curve and her rise ball. I would mix her changeup in a lot, but her best pitches were her backdoor curve ball and her rise ball. Okay, that's where she got her strikeouts. So that's knowing your pitcher. Maybe your pitcher's best pitch is her outside fastball. Maybe it's her changeup. Maybe it's her screwball. Whatever her best pitch is, you need to know that. Okay. Next thing for pitch calling. And this kind of goes into its own category where it's the game situation. Okay, so how many outs do we have? Where's the runners? Is there a runner on third base? Because if there's a runner on third base, it would be really convenient for a ground ball to be hit to the third baseman. That way she can check the runner and then make a throw to first. Is there a runner on first base with no outs? Is there a potential situation where the batter could bunt? Okay, that can really give you an idea about what pitch you want to call next. What's the score? Are you up by a lot of runs? Or are you down by a lot of runs? Is your pitcher throwing that pitch well today? Is she struggling to throw certain pitches on a certain day? And the last category you can kind of put into pitch calling is the batter. Who is standing at the plate right now? Who is trying to beat your pitcher? And what can you do as a catcher to try and prevent that from happening? When you're calling pitches, your number one priority is to keep the batter in the box off balance. From inning 1 to inning 7, you want to keep the batter in the box off balance. And you do that a bunch of different ways. You throw to different locations. You throw pitches that break differently. So pitches that break right, pitches that break left, up and down. You throw pitches that are different speeds. So you throw a fastball and come back with a changeup. It's difficult to make that adjustment on timing that quickly with hitting. Whatever you can do to make it a tougher situation for the hitter, that's what you want to do. You don't want to get into a pattern. You don't want to go outside, inside, changeup every single batter. You want to mix it up. Don't let them guess what's coming next. The last thing I would say when we're thinking about calling pitches is make sure, and this goes back to the last part of catching mentality, make sure your pitcher is comfortable with the pitches you're calling. It is a very healthy relationship between a pitcher and catcher when the pitcher is comfortable shaking her catcher off. Give me a thumbs up if you know what I mean by shaking your catcher off. Does anyone know what I mean when I say that? So if I call a pitch, let's say, Haley, let's say you're my pitcher, and you throw a curveball and you throw a changeup, and you don't like throwing changeups with 2 strikes. You like throwing your curveball with 2 strikes, but I call a changeup and you don't want to answer, you don't want to throw that pitch. So what you do as a pitcher is you shake me off. You say, no, I don't want to throw that pitch. And then I'm then forced to call another one. That's shaking off your catcher. And that's totally okay. That's something that should happen. You need your pitcher to tell you, I don't like throwing this pitch in this situation. I don't feel comfortable, or I'm not successful throwing this pitch in this situation. We need to go in a different direction. Or I was thinking a totally different thing here. I don't want to throw off speed. I want to throw something fast and on her hands. Whatever the situation is, it's a good thing for your pitcher to be shaking you off. Really what I wanted to introduce with the pitch calling situation is how much actually goes into calling every single pitch and how much thinking actually goes into it. But the best way to learn how to call pitches is to actually call pitches with batters in the box. You never learn what works and what doesn't until you call a hole at bat and that girl hits a line drive to left field on you. And then the next batter hits a line drive to left field. And then you think back and you're like, what was the same about that? Oh, I threw this pitch but twice and both times that pitch got hit. Those are the types of things you learn from actually calling pitches. So when you do start doing that, when you do start making those decisions on your own, don't worry about failing. You want to fail in the beginning. That's how you learn how to do it. I got really good at calling pitches because I've made bad choices when I was calling pitches when I was younger. I've called a changeup in a situation where I should have never called a changeup, and I ended up getting beat on it. My pitcher got hit, a run scored, and I had my coaches in the dugout looking at me like, what are you doing? Why did you call that? She already hit a changeup this game. That's how you learn. All in all, when it comes to just your overall catching mentality and when it comes to pitch calling, own all of it. Okay, being a catcher means that you didn't necessarily sign up to get the gold medal at the end of every single game, to get the MVP. That usually goes to the girl standing on the mound or the person who had the biggest hit. Sometimes there's parts of our job that we don't necessarily get rewarded for. It's funny how we put that mask on and we do all that work, but sometimes it feels like the mask kind of hides us from situations. But if you really love this position and you give it all of the things I've talked about here, the reward is going to be so much greater when you realize that you're the reason why your defense was able to execute a bunt play. You're the reason why your pitcher just threw a no-hitter because you called the entire game yourself. Those are really big moments. Those make you feel good when you pick up on the third base coach's signs because you were paying attention the whole game and you know that runner on first base is going to steal and then you throw her out. Those are things that happen when you adopt that catching mentality. So the biggest thing I want you to know is the second you put that mask on, turn that switch on. Get ready to go. Be a hustler, be a worker, work for your pitcher and work for your defense. That's the best catchers in the game. And if as a college coach, you know, when I'm looking at catchers, I'm looking at catchers who can block, I'm looking at catchers who talk, and I'm looking at catchers with good body language and who obviously are working for their pitchers. Okay? Can I answer any questions about anything I talked about today? All right, ladies. Coach, anything?
Yes. Okay. All right. So let me get on. All right. Oh, check it out. Mute audio. No, I want to come on. How the hell do I?
We can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay. In all honesty, it was a lot to absorb, but I like the technique. Here's what I have Jordan there, and I'm constantly yelling at her. Well, encouraging her, right, Jordan, to speak up. And she just does not take charge of the game. Yet Haley, who's a year younger, all right, has got a big mouth.
Good.
That is really a wonderful attribute. And then you've got kids here who are, you know, Amara is a very strong individual, but she's not a vibrant, loud. Obviously, I know most of the kids fairly well. All right, the kids are all beginners, right? I would like to have some sort of repartee between you and them about why they don't take more charge, okay? Why they're not working on their individual game skills as the leader. I always tell them, you're the only one who's got the ticket to the game and watch everything that's going on. All right, so you got to run the show, and
Absolutely.
I would like to take maybe 5 or 10 minutes for you to have a discourse with these young ladies to say, hey, why is it that this is such a poor part of your game, and what can we do to bring that forward? A kid like Jordan can throw the shit out of the ball when she wants to, but she doesn't let anybody know what's going on. And a kid like Haley tells everybody, all right, but I think she's got to be more into the game in reference to that. And again, to reiterate, Amara's not playing this season really hurt because Amara's just evolving. She's very strong, and she played in the fall against us. She plays for Mary Lewis, and she did a really admirable job for somebody coming over a major injury. So if we could spend a little bit, and maybe you would go after each kid a little bit and see, hey, what are your strengths? Why don't you do these things? I kind of let that kind of the ball. So, all right.
Okay.
I'm gonna mute.
Haley, talk to me a little bit about what is difficult about the vocal parts of being a catcher for you individually. What individually is difficult about being a vocal catcher for you?
I just I don't know how to explain it. I get distracted very easily.
Okay.
And sometimes I'll call out the wrong thing, or I don't know exactly what's going on, and I don't know what to call out because I just have to pay attention more.
So I think from what you're describing right now, I think the biggest thing that if you were going to take away from this, and I know Coach definitely, I agree with Coach when he said, I did tell you a lot of information, and that was why I sent out the sheet so you guys can go back and reference it. So sorry for the large amount of information, but I wanted to cover everything. But I think the biggest thing, Haley, that you should take from this is the pre-pitch thinking. Start making it a habit that every single pitch, you're reminding yourself of the outs, the runner, the situation, and whatever else is going on in the game in that moment that you think you need to make sure you remind yourself of. Try and really focus on that pre-pitch thinking, because it seems like you're ready to say something. It's just a matter of what are you actually going to say. Does that make sense? Good? Jordan, what is tough for you about the vocal parts of catching? So Coach touched on it a little bit, saying that you're a little bit on the quieter side, which is totally fine. But explain to me maybe what is tough about that vocal part for you.
I'm mainly scared that I would say the wrong thing and throw everybody off.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. Anytime I teach this part about being a catcher, that is the biggest fear is what if the thing I'm going to say isn't right? What if I tell everybody to go 2, but really we should be going 1? And here's what I'm going to say to that. In practice, when you're standing at home plate, catching in for a coach, do you have situations like that where you're at home plate just catching in and your coach is hitting infield and outfield?
Yeah.
Does that happen? So that's the time to practice. So if you don't feel game ready to just go out and vocally start shouting anything out, do it at practice first. Okay, what's the worst thing that could happen at practice if you say the wrong thing? Nothing. They make the wrong throw maybe in practice, and then what happens? You talk about what was not right, you talk about what was, and then you move on from that. And then better for the next time. And maybe it takes you 3, 4, 5, 10 times to understand that play. Who cares? Take all those 10 times during practice. That way, when there is that runner on first base in less than 2 outs, you can confidently go out in front of home plate and say, hey, we might have a bunting situation here. Be ready for that. The other thing I'll say too is be confident. Okay, give yourself a little bit more credit. How long have you been playing softball? How many years?
7 or 8.
7 or 8 years, and you don't know anything? That's not true. You know way more than you're giving yourself credit for. 7 or 8 years of softball means 7 or 8 years of experience, and there's plenty, and that's definitely enough experience that in between batters, you can at least say the outs, where the runner is, and where the play might be. Start there. And if you start there at that easy place of just in between batters, you'll be able to build yourself up to the point where you'll be able to call plays out as they're happening. That takes a long time, but be confident in the 7 or 8 years of knowledge you already have and give yourself that chance at practice. Okay. Mia, what is tough about the vocal parts of catching for you?
I haven't really catched, so I just want to be a catcher. I want to learn. I want to learn every place in the game.
Awesome. That's awesome. That's totally great. So for a catcher who is a rookie, if you are being put, I'm going to tell you the same thing that I told Jordan, that if you're at practice and you are working at that catching position, the best place for you to be during infield is right next to the coach and vocally trying to be part of that practice, be part of that game. If you have a runner on first base and there's less than 2 outs, where should the infield be looking? Runner on first base, less than 2 outs.
Oh, so you could still, so it's not a bit of a, since we have less than 2 outs, and I guess like first.
Where are you gonna throw the ball?
If you're trying to get the lead runner, where would you want to throw the ball?
Second base. Second base.
Yeah, totally. So that's when you're at practice and you see that situation, say it out loud. And if you say first base there, then you have a coach there who can say, yeah, we can go to first, but maybe we could also go to second. And that's exactly how that happens. So in that situation where you're kind of sitting there, do I want to go to second here? Do I want to go to first here? You know, what's the best case scenario for us? Practice, do that at practice. And like I said, be confident. Everyone has to start somewhere. So don't be afraid to, none of you should be afraid to say the wrong thing, especially at practice, I love as a coach when I'm hitting a round of infield and a discussion happens. Somebody says something that I'm like, wait a second, let's talk about that. Let's talk about this situation and figure out how we're going to work through it next time. That's the only way people are going to learn. So when you're in that situation, don't be afraid to say the wrong thing. The wrong thing can just lead to another conversation and more for everyone else to understand the situation better. Okay?
Okay.
Great.
I got a question.
Yes. How are you? What question do you have?
So for the rookies, would it be bad during a game to say, I want to, coach, ask the coach, is that a good call? And then tell the team 2 on 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
if it was a situation like your coach called a bunt defense, like hypothetically say you call your bunt defenses with colors, maybe not shout out the bunt defense play in that situation because it's more of a secret type of scenario. But if there's a runner on first base, there's nothing wrong with the catcher turning the dugout and saying, we looking to here. That's not a secret. You know, obviously the runner's going to take off on a ground ball. If you're just checking as a rookie to make sure, hey, I just want to make sure I'm giving them the right information, absolutely. Call timeout. You can call timeout as a player as many times as you want. I can't call timeout and come onto the field, but you can call timeout and walk over to the dugout, and there's no problem with that. Even if you can have the conversation, you know, across the field, that's totally fine. I encourage that for new catchers.
Thank you.
Cool. You're welcome.
There we go.
Kala, Kayla,
Amara.
Hi.
Hi, Amara. What is tough about the vocal parts of catching for you?
I don't know what happens, but I talk most of the time in practice. Like if I'm practicing catching, I talk, and then I get to the game, and then I just don't. So.
Do you think you're maybe a little bit nervous about it?
Yeah, like what everybody else said, I'm afraid that I'm gonna say the wrong thing and then have everybody do the wrong play.
Right. So here's my advice. You know, let's say that, you know, by the fall we're definitely going to be back playing softball, because I think we're all hoping for that if anything by fall we're playing ball. So let's say that we're in the fall season and you're behind the plate and you're trying to work on the vocal parts of your catching. That's the best time to do it. Don't start practicing your vocal parts of catching in your championship playoff game. Start in the fall. That way, if you do make a mistake, it's not a dire mistake. It's not the end of the world. You're never going to build that confidence if you don't just try. And the best way to try is by doing that in between batters thing that I described. Because you can, how long have you been playing softball? How many years?
I'm in the car. I've been playing
okay.
softball since I was in 4th grade.
So a long time, I would have to say.
Yeah.
I think at this point, you're more than capable of alerting your team with how many outs, you know, where's the runner, and where that play, if it was a routine ground ball, would end up. You're probably 100% capable of that. So start there in between batters and work your way up to the ball was put in play and I'm actually real time telling my defense what's going on, because that's hard. That takes a really long time to be able to, in real time, control your defense. And even then, you're not the one actually fielding the ball. So many things can go wrong that are out of your control. But one thing you can control is that in between batters, you know, addressing your defense with the outs, the runner, and the situation.
Okay.
Cool. Great.
Now that I know Kayla's on and she's a first, right? Is that Kayla McGarvey that's on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Kayla.
Hi.
Kayla, what's tough for you with the vocal parts of
She's
catching?
never
What do you
caught
think?
before, Coach.
So you're a rookie too?
Yeah.
Okay, so then my advice would be the same advice that I gave Mia, and I know you were listening. I saw you listening the whole time. Treat that situation the same. So because you're so new, don't be afraid to try anything. Give it a go. Be confident about it, and just learn from the mistakes. I wouldn't even consider them mistakes. They're almost just like perfect scenarios to learn something new, especially when you're at practice. So when you're catching in for your coach at practice, try and be vocal there. And when you get to the game, in between batters, that's what we're looking at. Okay? All right, cool, girls. Well, thank you very much. That was really good. I'm glad I was able to give you guys some feedback, and I hope you learned even just one thing from all the talking I did today.
Well,
Coach, anything else from you?
no, I'm glad that we were able to get one-on-one with the kids.
This is great.
Emily Lipovac is going to be in touch with you because she was
Perfect.
out and she wanted to make sure she touched base. Let's you and I talk, you know, the weekends may be the time where, especially since the weather's good, that we should try to keep maybe to the weekdays for the kids.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that.
All right. Because
We can work something for later this week or next week, whatever you guys are up for.
I had 2 kids that were having their grandparents on a distance visit, you know.
Totally fine.
So it was pretty cool. Ladies, I think that once again, we had just a wonderful presentation, and we're very lucky to have a coach who knows what the hell she's talking about and can get it across to you. Remember that later on, we'll send you the video version of this. Sam didn't tell me about anybody who sent their questions, but I'm going to be pushing you guys to send Coach Sam some questions so that you can always learn. All right?
I got a couple text messages, so.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, we're starting to get going. But girls, don't be afraid to text me. Seriously, if you get my info from Coach Lou, you can shoot me a text anytime. That's the best way to get a hold of me, especially if it's about catching.
Well, we keep saying it. So, guys, have a great week. We'll let you know when Coach is up again. We'll see when she's behind the dish. Oh, I think that's what we're going to call it.
Oh, I like that.
Behind the dish with Coach Sam.
Perfect. I love it.
That's
I might have to steal that from you, actually. That's actually too good that I can't just let you have it.
the greatest form of flattery is to steal someone's ideas.
Yeah,
Right?
I
And
agree.
always that's what I tell my students when they cheat. I said, you cheated and you got a higher grade than the person you cheated off because you had your knowledge and now you got
Plus
their
theirs.
knowledge. So just a little bit better. Behind the dish, that's who you will be. Okay, behind the dish with Coach Sam. All right,
right,
guys,
ladies.
have a great weekend.